Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another week of Crunching Your Growth, the show where we cut through the fluff and get straight to what actually moves the needle for entrepreneurs. And today we're tackling a problem that quietly costs small businesses a fortune. And actually, I was having this conversation yesterday with an e commerce company. And the guy is scaling, the founder is scaling. And he said, I'm hiring people, but the thing that keeps me up at night is not having the right team. I'm not building leaders. And it just so happened that tonight, we're tackling that problem, promoting from within, but hoping, building leaders, right? Because most people promote from within, but they hope that leadership shows up. But you really have to think about how to build leaders, how to hire leaders. So my guest this week is Rich Ashton. He's an entrepreneur, he's an author, and he's a leadership trainer. Spent 4 decades building a successful HVAC and plumbing business. And one of the keys to his success was learning how to coach technicians and salespeople into dependable, motivated managers. But he also wrote a book called Growing Your Own, and he works directly with business teams, small business teams, through customizable on-site leadership training built from his real-world lessons, not just textbook theory. So we're going to talk about how to build leaders from within and what most owners get wrong when they promote, and how to create leadership pipeline that makes your company stronger every single year. And I thought it was really insightful yesterday when I was talking to this other founder, when he was saying the thing that keeps me up at night, because the question was, hey, what do you think your biggest obstacle is right now to growth? And he said, the thing that keeps me up at night is not cash flow management, which is usually the number one thing. Am I going to run out of cash? Am I going to run out of cash? He said, it's how do I build leadership to be able to take myself out of the business almost. I want to be the chairman and CEO. I don't want to be the guy who has to answer all the questions. So hopefully Rich can explain all this to us, and let's bring him in and see what he has to say on the subject of leadership. Rich, thanks for taking the time to come on and share your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it.
Hey, what a great intro, boy! You nailed all of it. It sounds like I'm here on the right day.
It just so happened. I'm serious. That was the conversation I had. I'm coaching him, and he's really done a great job scaling his business. But I thought it was insightful, because most of the time when I ask people, what keeps you up at night? What do you think your obstacles are? They always go to cash, because everybody's always money, cash, and his was, I'm not worried about cash. I'll manage that part, but it's building leaders. So yeah, you're here on the right day. Why don't you give us a little background into you, what you've done? You've had a long career, so why don't you tell us about it? Tell us about, and then you can get into, your whole thesis of why you think and why you think the way you do.
Sure. I had the greatest foundation in business that anybody could ever have, and I just totally, by good fortune, I worked for a company called Trammell Crow in the real estate
Oh,
development business when I
okay.
when I first got out of the Navy, and I was surrounded by people who were smarter and more driven than I was. I had dropped out of college after 2 years, and everybody in the company had at least a degree, and most had Ivy League MBAs. And so I got a real world dose of what smart people thought, and how hard they worked. And it was it was just transformational for me. But also, it was a company that believed in a great culture. It believed in doing business ethically and empowering people. And so I wasn't passionate about the real estate business. And after 10 years, I decided to sell my interest back to my partners and go chase small business. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I started a couple of businesses. I bought a couple of businesses. I did some investing. And ultimately, in 1988, I decided to buy a broken down, near bankrupt HVAC company, and I still own that company, which is now two companies. Along the way, I just fell in love with small business. I fell in love with it because you can create your own culture. It's unique. It's around your values, and you get to know everybody that you work with. So generally, the company has been around 50 people for the last few years, solidly in the small business category. Uh, I first start by connecting with people. That's what I enjoy. That's what makes business fun for me. But along the way, we face that problem that all small businesses do. When it's time to offload responsibilities, who do you offload them to? And you can go outside and you can find an experienced leader, but you're going to get a leader probably from a large business. And large businesses are great, but they do business totally differently than small
Oh,
businesses.
yeah. Yeah.
An operations manager, for instance, in a big company, is doing one, two, or three things, doing them well, doing basically the same thing every day, and lots of structure, lots of rules, lots of organization. When you take that person and put them in a small business, they're going to pull their hair out. Uh, the lack of organization, the lack of structure drives those people crazy. But it also drives your existing employees crazy because they haven't ever reported to anybody that depended on structure and all of that stuff. One
Sure.
of the fun things about small businesses, you get to do so many things. It's not that you do one, two, or three, you do everything. The problem with that is that nobody's good at everything. And so, you take somebody like me, and my strengths are marketing and vision and finance and those kinds of things, product development. But I'm not an operations guy. And
Right.
and so if I can offload operations, I can concentrate on the other things in the business that I'm good at.
Yeah.
And that's the basic dilemma. If you promote from within, as you said earlier in the intro, you promote someone who has not been prepared to lead. They may be a great employee, they may be a great human being, but if you haven't been able to pour resources into them and train them, you're going to ultimately fail and you're going to lose a good employee in the process. So along the way, I decided that if I was ever going to retire successfully, or even if I was going to sell the business, but sell a team that was so strong that the buyer insisted on keeping them on, which was my goal. Then I had to pour resources into getting them ready for that day, and that began about 8 years ago. I started trying to teach them to think like me, an entrepreneurial owner. That was not necessary, nor was it productive. That effort failed. And so I kind of retooled it and went to a more traditional, just leadership training program. Went online to supplement my own knowledge, found that there's plenty of leadership information online, but it doesn't have anything to do with small business.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'm going to have to develop this on my own. And along the way, I wasn't happy with the progress. And so I said, I don't know why this occurred to me that it might work, but I decided I would write a blog to the leadership team every 2 weeks. And the idea was that I would create water cooler conversation around leadership principles, and it didn't work. Uh,
Hmm.
they were happy with the information. They kind of enjoyed reading the blogs. They were easy to read, but it didn't spur any intercommunication.
Hmm.
The general manager had a great idea, and he said, in our weekly management meetings, I'm going to set aside 20 minutes on the week you write the blog, and we're going to talk about the blogs openly. And once they began talking about them in a group, then it really caught fire. They would go back to blogs and say, "Hey, I think Rich wrote about this about 2 weeks ago. He suggested we solve the problem this way." Or, "I don't think you're following the rules. Let's go back and look at that blog." And all of a sudden, they were holding each other accountable and they were making real progress as a team. I was walking through the company one day. I noticed that there were some white binders on desks that I hadn't seen before. I said, "What's in the white binders?" They said, "We're printing out your blogs and keeping them on our desktop for ready reference." And I thought, gosh, that's a nice compliment. So that went on for 2 years. And by the end of 2 years, I had pretty well told them about as much as I knew about leadership and management, and they were doing well. So it was time for me to back off a little bit. One weekend, I read through. I had 52 blogs at that point. I read through the blogs, and I said, "This is really good information." And I said, even if I only do it for a legacy project, I'm going to publish this in book form.
Yeah.
And I went through and cut it from 52 down to 35 principles, published it in May of last year. And now that I have been able to retire and devote some time to it, now I'm marketing the book. And what began as a legacy project, my entrepreneurial nature kind of took over, and the information is good and it should be shared with the small business community. And so I'm attempting to do that. So that was a long personal introduction. I covered a lot of territory.
That's all right. Yeah, I mean that's good info. You're 100% right. I don't think that. Um, I'll tell you from what I've seen in my lifetime, both working, for both building companies and in some instances working within companies and coaching is sometimes people get promoted not because of um, what their skill set is or because they're great leaders, but because they've been there the longest.
Mm-hmm.
And I always look at there Best Buy a few years ago, I think probably 15 years ago now or 12 years ago, when the founder was getting ready to retire, and he went to the board and he said, this guy should be the next CEO. He's been here the longest. He knows the business, blah, blah, blah. And they gave him the job as the CEO, and he was out within 6 months because not only was he not performing, but he also got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, not the money cookie jar, the employee cookie jar, and and he wound up leaving in disgrace. But and then there's so many um, examples. I read about when Larry Ellison was scaling his business, Oracle. He back in the early '90s, he got to a certain point where he nearly went bankrupt. The company was faltering, and what the problem was when he analyzed it was that the team that got him from zero to they weren't billions of dollars now. I mean, the team that got him from like zero to 500 million couldn't get him over the hump, and they were actually costing him money. And he said, look, these were great people. Like, we were together for a long time, but I had to make some hard decisions. And he wound up having to replace that entire team. But I see it all the time with founders that say, well, this person helped me in the first 2 years. Okay, great. But they may not be the person that's going to get you to 10, 20, 30 million in revenue. So I think you're dead on. Some companies are not focused on building leaders. They're focused more on continually, uh, um, hiring from within and just regenerating the same people over and over again.
Well, and to be brutally frank, when you're running a small business, half the time you're in survival mode. Uh, Leadership training is a pretty low priority, and in my case, I ran the company for 25 years before I got serious about leadership development,
Yeah.
in a formalized basis. By the time I was able to do that, I was working with a general manager who took most of the day-to-day responsibility off my shoulders. But the average small businessman does not have time to do leadership training.
Yeah,
And
no, that's a fair point. You're no question about it. But you also have to think about even if you're not focused on leadership training, you also have to think about who you're promoting within the company.
no
So,
question.
yeah,
And that's one of the things I really like as I have even gotten more acquainted with my book as I talk about it and see what people respond to. The idea that tradespeople are going to read a John Maxwell book is just not logical. And John Maxwell's books are fabulous, and I've read a number of them. But that's not the way you train tradespeople to become leaders. You train them with examples and short bursts. And it just so happens that because my book was written as blogs, all of the chapters are short, two to 2.5 pages, and each one illustrates a principle which is very simple to digest, simple enough to where you can read a chapter in the morning, put a principle in use in the afternoon, and see immediate results. And when you are training non-leaders, people who haven't had formalized training in leadership, that's a much more effective way to train them. And if the small business owner doesn't have time, and as I said, most of them don't, then something like my book is or the training course, or both, that's a real quick way to start solving that problem. And you're not going to solve it in 6 months. But if you start pouring a little bit of leadership on a regular basis into your team, you'll be shocked at how much they'll absorb and how much they'll grow in a year or 2 years.
Yeah.
So by the time you need to promote, they're ready.
Yeah. It's amazing you're talking and I'm thinking about this company that we do business with. We don't Most of our clients are consumer products and they're doing, whatever, 5-10 million dollars a year, and then they're trying to get to 100 million. That's really, and we work in the primarily beauty, food, and personal care space. But outside of that, we have a sprinkling of clients in different fields, and we have an industrial company, concrete and construction. And when you said Trammell Crow, Trammell now they work with them to build some of these big buildings in town. But they didn't start out that way. The company started in 1973, and it was just a guy in his pickup truck, the founder. And what he realized early on was that he loved doing the work, but he wasn't ever going to be able to grow his business
Mhm.
by doing the work. But that's the part he loved.
Mhm.
And so he hired these two people, and essentially every week they met, and he essentially trained them on what his expectation was for them to do, right? Which was to protect him, to run the company so that he could do the work and he could be out in the field with the teams, doing all this. And he literally have scaled that company to it's huge now. I mean, they've got 250 mixer trucks out there. They're building all these massive buildings in Washington D.C., Baltimore, all the way down to Virginia. I mean, it's a massive company, but he still starts his day off by going to one of the job sites because that's what interests him. And he's got a great team. He's got a president. He's got these all these people in the office that know exactly what their role is, and that enables him to be able to do what he loves to do. So,
Well, he had some real insight that very few business owners have, and it's interesting. Most of them, regardless of their desires, take themselves into the office. He didn't. He went out to the field and got people who were better in the office than he was, and that says a lot.
yeah, no. He's an interesting guy and a different kind of guy, but he does a lot with the community. He runs a camp in the summer for underprivileged youth from the city, and teaches them skills, woodworking, things like that. And he does it himself. He's there with a couple of people, and he enjoys it. The guy loves doing the work. Does not want to be bothered with the big decisions. That's for somebody else. I mean, he sets the tone. He has meetings, and he's definitely the CEO, but he just those people are leaders and they've been with him for, I mean, 30, 40 years.
Oh, I
So,
bet they have, because that's a real empowering culture.
oh yeah, it's a great company that it's one of our favorite companies to work with, because they do things so well.
Mhm.
But it's definitely outside of our core sphere of not so. Yeah,
Interesting. That's a great story. That's a different take on it. I don't think I have heard somebody doing exactly what he did.
I never have. I never have. I mean, we deal with companies. Usually it's the opposite. Usually you have the CEO, the owner, the founder. They don't want to let go, even if it's
They
even
get in
in
the way of everything.
yeah, even in the e-commerce world. It doesn't even need to be a small. I mean, they're all small businesses. They start out as small businesses, but even in the e-commerce world, where you've got fairly intelligent people that are focused on, you wind up with a CEO who can't let go, and they tend to be the bottleneck in the business, and they complain about growth, but they tend to be the bottleneck, and they don't want to necessarily. They're afraid sometimes to train people to take over for them, because they don't want to relinquish that control. So it's very rare that I had this conversation yesterday and I have this other guy that we do business with, that these are guys that see the value of creating leaders so that they can do what they want to do.
Oh, it only makes sense. If there are three of you that are capable of doing something, you're going to do three times as much. I mean, it's a pretty basic principle. But I agree with you. A lot of founders have trouble turning over that responsibility. Uh, Fortunately, I didn't suffer from that problem. I had other problems, but I didn't suffer from that one.
I I suffered from that problem in my first business. I did not suffer after that. I suffered from my first business, and it was a disaster. And I learned. It took me a couple of years to really reflect on myself, but I learned that I was the obstacle in that business, and then I never made that mistake again. So I try and very much so develop people because I want to be able to not have to be here every day. So
But when I bought the HVAC company, I'm not an HVAC guy.
yeah,
So I'm not capable of fixing my own air conditioner. So there wasn't any question that I had to delegate a lot of responsibility when I took over that company.
yeah, I'll bet, and I'll bet it was culturally difficult for HVAC guys to go. The heck is this guy buying us for? He doesn't know anything about HVAC.
And they resisted it. I think they liked me. They appreciated me as a leader, but if it didn't come from a technical mouth, they weren't interested in hearing it. And I once I learned that and learned I had to communicate to them through other people, it made my life a lot easier.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can't. That's not my forte. I can't fix things. I certainly can't fix HVAC, but I'll tell you a quick, really funny story. My son got has this girlfriend, and she's a nuclear a nuclear engineer. She
Mm.
works for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in DC, and her mother's her mother's heat pump, air conditioning pump, broke, and I guess it was going to take a while for the folks to come out, and she was out there, taking it apart to fix it. And I said, how are you going to fix it? She goes, well, I mean, it's fairly simple stuff. It's just a capacitor and a blah, 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 and a pump and a thing, and once you figure out which one is broken, you just replace it. And I'm going, yeah, okay, I wouldn't know what a capacitor looked like if my life depended on it.
Yep, different skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you do with the book? Do you have a training program for the book, and how are you handling that whole piece?
We do, and at this stage, I'm such a I guess, people person that I'm doing it in person. So people invite me to come to their company, and I conduct a training program on site, three 2-hour sessions spread over 2 days, plus a meet and greet, so I can meet the team and get a feel for who it is that I'm going to be training. So each course it's basically the same, but once I have met the people, then I can tweak it to the individual group that I'm training, and after 6 hours together, we have made major progress. And then because the book is written as a desktop reference, it's a leave behind guide that then they can regularly refer to. And as I said earlier, the chapters are 2.5 pages long. The principles are simple, but you find very few people who are executing all of the principles on a regular basis. In fact, although the book was written for low-level leaders, uh, I have a number of friends who are now retired from being CEOs of various companies, and as I handed them out to them and they read them, the comment I got was, I'm not sure that I learned anything new, but I sure was reminded of things that I used to do that I should still be doing. And I think that's a good description of the book. It's not rocket science, but it's real necessary science, and it's very basic and very digestible and very relatable.
Yeah. Well, it's never, there's no new principles in the world. You can come up with new acronyms and you can do all kinds of things, but when it comes down to it, fundamentally, it's still the basics that you have to cover. Um, you know, when you look at all the athletes that are out there, they're not out there trying to practice trick plays. They're out there trying to focus on the basics. So
Do the same thing over and over. That's
it's the
right.
same principles.
Yep.
So, did you self publish it, or how did you publish it?
I did self-publish it through Palmetto Publishing. It was the first time I've been through that. It was an interesting process. I thought they did a nice job. The editing was pretty tedious. I think you've probably been through that, and so I found that to be the hardest part. But it was a pretty enjoyable process. It took 3 or 4 months, and I'm very glad I did it. I love sharing this message, and I love empowering people. And when they get a hold of this information and go, really, that's how you do it. A light bulb goes off, and it's fun to see them grow. We've got stories in the company of people who never thought they would be in a leadership role, and I've got one employee been with us 19 years, and he started out on the low rung of the food chain, and he never saw himself as a leader. He was going to work for us for 6 months and get enough money to go back to Mexico.
Yeah.
And 19 years later, he's on the leadership team. He's a very effective part of the leadership team, runs our warehousing operation, and he's a better father. He's the head of he's Hispanic, so they have a large family, and he's the patriarch of the family, and now he knows how to handle that role. It's just been remarkable seeing him take every step along the way.
Yeah. It's funny because you don't see many people targeting that level, right? Everybody who wants to do leadership coaching, leadership training, they want to do it on an enterprise level, or they want to do it in, 10 million to $100 million companies, or
Mhm.
$50 million companies, whatever it is. But you don't see them focus so much on, small businesses, where it's probably needed even more. So I'm sure those folks that are getting that training appreciate it a lot more, because they never thought of themselves as rising up and being leaders. So
We start out when I'm doing the training, and I go through and the meet and greet, and get in just a few minutes you can pretty well tell what's holding people back.
sure.
And so the question is, you have an interest in leadership. What's holding you back? And for some, it's the way they were raised. Maybe they were in an abusive home, and they just kind of happy to have survived. And others, like the gentleman that I described, he just never saw himself as a leader. He wasn't in a home where leadership was modeled, and he was happy to have a paycheck. There are other people who think they want to be leaders, and then you find out that maybe there's really not a great desire. There's not a desire to take on the level of accountability and responsibility that goes along with being a leader. Whatever those ceilings are, if they're willing, then it's really fun to raise the ceiling or have them break through the ceiling. And sometimes it's multiple ceilings. And out of we started out with 8 in the program. 6 survived. One decided he didn't want to work that hard to be a leader, and the other he just couldn't apply the principles. And he was a good guy, and he was a good salesman, but he wasn't able to lead. And so we got down to 6, but I think 75% in a leadership training program is probably a pretty good ratio. And so I'm really proud. I was especially proud the end of the year to be able to step out and say, it's yours now.
Yeah.
And I'm in a chairman role, so I'm not totally divorced, and I meet with the president once a week for about 45 minutes off site, and I think he likes the idea that he can still bounce things off of me. There's still some things that I'm stronger in. I'm stronger in finance and probably the overall vision, but he's stronger than I am in operations, and he's certainly stronger technically than I am, and it has not been difficult for me because I have seen them grow up and take these roles on and succeed. So it really hasn't been very difficult for me to step away.
Yeah. I remember I started a retail chain, and we started out with one store, and we had just employees, just people that were servicing the counter, and servicing stock and things like that. And I knew, we were going to open up more stores. That was the whole intent, was to build a small chain. And we were actively out looking for locations. So we used to have these monthly training meetings where we were trying to get people to understand where we were heading and why we were putting in processes and systems that they didn't quite understand because they came out of they looked at it as this is one store. My job is to service the customers when they come in, make sure that the money comes in, make sure nobody's stealing. What more is it is there to it? And we kept explaining to them because some of you are going to be managers. Some of you are going to we're trying to build more stores. And I'll never forget there was this guy Joe, and he cleaned. That's what he did. He cleaned the store, and he used to come in at noon every day, and he would just clean for 8 hours and stock, and that was his job. And he was an inner city guy, and he had no education. I think he probably dropped out of school at 8, and at 8th grade, and he, we used to have him come, and he used to say afterwards, you know, Mr. Phil, I don't understand why I'm here, man. My job is to clean the store. I said, Joe, just trust me on this. You're going to come to a point where maybe you don't want to clean the store. Maybe you want to do something else. And he would listen and listen and listen. And when we got to the second store and we were opening up the second store, I said to him, Joe, I need you to go to the second store and help us open up that second store. I said, this is what I want you to do. And then eventually, I think by the third store, he kind of understood. Oh, I see what you're doing. You're training me to understand how to open these stores up and get them running the way they're supposed to be running. And I was like, a light bulb went off in his head. And he said to me about 2 years later, he said to me, why did you pick me? He said, I'm not smart. I don't have a college education. I don't know this. I said, you don't have college education, Joe, but you're a smart guy. You just didn't realize you were a smart guy because all you were doing was cleaning the stores and you thought that's all you were good for. I said, and you didn't see what you were good for. And it, and he eventually, he did a great job for us. And, unfortunately we sold the company, but he went to work for Starbucks after that. And he was a trainer for Starbucks, or he went out and opened up stores for Starbucks. So it was pretty interesting to watch.
Don't you find that remembering stories like that is more fun than remembering the financial successes along the way?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I do. That's just
Oh, I could.
that's the highlight of my business career is the stories of the people who made major moves.
Oh, I got a bunch of them. I took risks on. I tell people all the time. When I hire people, I've plucked people out of other places just because I was at a I was at a Dunkin' Donuts one morning, and we were doing we had a shaving company. It was e-commerce, and we were growing quickly, and we needed customer service. We needed somebody in customer service, and I went into my Dunkin' Donuts in the morning. It was a busy Dunkin' Donuts. Usually, it took like 15 minutes just to get a coffee, and I'm lying, and there's this young woman, and she's got everything under control. The customers, obviously, you start waiting online for 10, 15 minutes, they get antsy. She's got everybody under control. And it was the first time I saw her there. And, I thought she's got a very good demeanor about her. The second time I went in, and she's pleasant. Second time I went in and she did the same thing because the place was always busy. The third time I gave her my card. I said, call me. I said, I have something I want to talk to you about. And, I said, look, I don't want to get personal, but I don't know how much money you're making there, but here's what I can do for you. I said, and you wouldn't have to come to a store. You could sit in our office and all you have to do is work the phones. And, I hired her. I didn't care about it. I never asked her what her education was. I never asked her what her prior was. I just asked, I just based it on what I witnessed. And she was great. She was great. She was with us for the entire time. And, I'm sure she loved it because it was something she never thought of doing.
You built the culture in that company, and so you knew what it took to be successful. And when you spotted somebody who fit your culture and obviously could execute on a plan, um, that's what's important. It all starts with culture, and it starts with how you guys go to market. Simon Sinek wrote a great book. I'm sure you've written it called read it called Start with Why.
Yeah.
And when we went through that book as a group, and we didn't change the way we were doing business, but we refined the way we thought about our business. And when you have a guidepost that which is what your culture is really, a grounding that says this is who we are, this is why we're in business, this is where we're going, so you have the ability then to filter every decision in the company through that why. That's powerful, and that's you talk about your why when you're in the interviewing process. You talk about it daily in the company. Your customers feel it. You market from a position of your why, and I think that's another really fun thing to be so grounded and understand your culture that you can spot somebody on the street and go, they're our kind of person. We need them in the organization.
Yeah.
And then the beauty of that is when you find people that fit your culture, they don't leave for $1 an hour. They don't go down the street and work for your competitor because they know they've found something that fits. Their culture is the same as your culture, and so you have you fixed a turnover problem.
Oh yeah, we didn't really turn people over because I think there were a couple of things that happened when you do that. I think that people, this young woman was probably visual, thought of herself as a cashier in a
Mhm.
store, and maybe she would work her way up to be a manager. She never thought about being a customer service person on an e-commerce company, answering phones and solving problems, right? But she had the demeanor because I'm sure that when customers aren't happy, they tend to be they yell. They can yell, they can be nasty, and she just had this way of bringing people down to the point where they would stop yelling, and she'd be like, "Look, I'm solving your problem. Everything's okay." And she didn't. The thing that I liked about it was she didn't take it personally. She didn't walk away going, "Oh God, these customers." It was just on to the next thing, and she was, getting her coffee. How your day going? Oh, it's great. The customers are great. Everybody's happy, and you're like, you just got yelled at by a customer. Oh, that's he just was upset. You're like, okay, and
Yeah,
that's sort of what you want in customer
there's
service.
not many of those out there either.
No, no, not at all. But she could just she let it roll off her back, and it was she was fantastic at it. The problem was we couldn't we couldn't train that. We kept saying, how do we train that? How do we train these other people that we're bringing in to handle things the way she does? And you really can't. She just had this demeanor where she wasn't going to let it bother her because she wasn't personalizing it. The customer had a problem with it. She was going to solve the problem. If he's yelling, okay, let him yell. We're solving the problem. He can't hurt me. And but we couldn't. It was really difficult to train that. It was really difficult when we needed more customer service people because you wind up getting, oh, I was on the phone again with the Mr. Blah blah blah. He's got a problem. He's not happy again. It's like, okay, well, did we solve the problem? Yeah, we did. Okay, well, let's move on. But you can't. It's difficult to find people who can just.
Did you try to have her train people?
Yeah, yeah, we did.
That has worked for us. Is the reason that I asked that because it's a magic to a personality that can do that. Um, I don't know that we have ever taken a really great customer service person and replicated them, but we have definitely made the people around them better just by the modeled behavior and by letting the people who are really excellent at it do the training, even though they're not in a position that would normally be the position of a trainer.
Yeah. No, she could train him. She trained him and she definitely elevated the group. But, what we were trying to think of is, how do you model that so that, how do you model that so we can take that and, and do more with it. But no, she definitely did a great job as she was the first customer service hire. So she was training all those who came
Yeah.
behind her. But yeah, she was a great person, you know.
You mentioned modeling. One of the surprises to me was that people do not naturally just take behavior that works and copy it onto their own playbook. And I always thought if I was this kind of a leader, that the next layer of leadership would automatically become that kind of leader too.
Yeah.
And I found through this training process that you have to be much more strategic and much more intentional about communicating that to people because they don't see it in themselves.
Yeah.
They have to be taken through the process step by step, and you can't just say do what I do. But on the other hand, I encourage our people to find mentors in and outside the company. It has certainly worked for me. I've often told the story that in my early 40s, my career began to stagnate, and I didn't know what was different or what I was doing wrong. And when I took a real hard look at myself, I found that I was kind of an authoritarian leader, having copied my father, and that wasn't working. And so I I was not terribly relational at that point in my life. And my wife is highly relational. And I began to say, I bet you I could learn something from her. And she doesn't care anything about business, but she is one heck of a relationship builder. And I've learned a ton from my wife about interacting with people. And so she's one of my mentors. I encourage people to look everywhere, all day long, every day. I obviously have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs and have been successful, and I've copied stuff that they do that I don't do as well. So it's a continual learning process. But if you don't kind of force people to do that, just like we had to force the team to read the blogs out loud, um, when you force people to look for mentors and look for models and role models, it's surprising what they will begin to learn and how they will begin to change.
I I'm laughing because I've had the same experience. I My wife has
I
had
thought maybe you were laughing at me.
no, my wife has had such an effect on me because of her demeanor. I I tend to be a little um, I don't want to say volatile, but I'm a yeller. I can yell. Okay. I try not to, but I can yell. And it takes a lot to get me there. But once you get me there, I can yell. But I also tend to be like, oh man, this has happened. This has happened. And I remember we bought a house this going back 12 years ago. And, it was a used house, right? It wasn't brand new. And, but there's systems in the house, air conditioning, heating systems, et cetera, and they break down. And we had a week where certain things just happened. Like we had to replace them, but we knew this when we bought the house. We knew these systems were old and they were eventually going to have to break down. And I walked upstairs. I was like, "Gosh darn it!" I said, "The water system is breaking down. We're going to need a whole new water system. It's going to cost X thousands of dollars." And she looks at, and I'm like, "God damn it!" And she said, "Well, when you own a house, you got to expect these things." And I said, I know. She goes, well, what's getting upset going to get you? You knew when we bought the house that this was the state, and we knew we were going to have to do it, and we put the money aside to do it. What are you getting upset about? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, it's not getting you anywhere, so stop. And, enough of that in my life. And all of a sudden I think, why am I getting upset about things?
Yeah, I explained mine. I've been through it, but also I mean, just when you look at your friends that are successful, they may not have overall success, but if they're good at something,
Yeah.
uh, you can learn something from
Oh, yeah.
everybody. Once I kind of got over myself, it made it a lot easier for me to learn from other people.
Yeah. No, I've definitely modeled behaviors. I said my first business, it was terrible. I was a terrible leader. I was a terrible process manager. It was awful. I feel so bad for the people who worked for me at the time. And I did it for 4 years. Business, I couldn't do it anymore. I knew there was a problem. I was working too many hours and I wound up selling the business. And I knew there was a problem, and I just didn't know what the problem was. But lucky enough, I made a little bit of money, and I moved to Maryland and went to graduate school because I think I needed to think differently, and I got involved, made a little investment in this small company. It was two stores, and they wanted to grow. And I can remember in graduate school, we had this one class, and the discussion was about leadership and process management and things like this. And I remember sitting there going, "Oh." I was the problem.
Mhm.
And then after that, I started taking a hard look at my behavior and things. And I got involved with this company, and the president of the company, the CEO, they were actually real estate developers, and they bought the company because they wanted food stores in some of the developments that they were building, like Reston Town Center and some of the buildings. And the CEO of the company was just this he was just this calm guy. You couldn't shake him. He just had great emotional intelligence. He was just, no matter what the problem was, you could come to him with the biggest problem, and he would sit there and think through it. And I started modeling that behavior because I thought, look at him. Um, he's not getting flustered. He never yells. He's pretty even keeled, and he's always got an answer, or he's always thinking about the process to the answer. And that was one of the first people around me that I modeled because of that behavior. I thought he was great. And then I read the book about emotional intelligence, and that sort of, I think, changed a lot of the way that I approached things. But I do pride myself on, after my first experience, I do pride myself on the fact that I am very critical of uh, uh, my own flaws. I do reflect on myself almost daily to see where I could have improved, and even in basic interactions with people, because I don't ever want to be, I never want to do what I did in that first business ever again.
Yeah, and I think that's a great skill for a small business person because typically they're isolated and they only have themselves to do that reflection. And if they're capable of it, it's powerful. An awful lot of them don't have that skill and don't have anybody to bounce things off of, and they can go off the reservation pretty quickly.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, the beauty today is that there's so many groups you can join of like-minded people that you can, get help in all
Mhm.
different places. We've got about 3 minutes, so any closing remarks? How do people get in touch with you? Where do they find your book? All that.
Okay, the book again is Growing Your Own. The website for the book and the training course and speaking engagements is growingyourown.net, not .com, but .net. And then I love interacting with people directly. If you'd like to email me, rich@growingyourown.net. One thing that we did not cover that is really, really important is the role of intellectual curiosity in the development of a leader. And I, I don't have to talk a lot about it, but I read constantly. I'll bet you do too. And that program of gaining knowledge makes you so much more effective in leadership, parenting, everything along the way, business. And I really encourage young leaders to get started on that program as early as they can, like tomorrow.
Yeah, no, no, no. I agree with you. I don't read as much. I listen to books now because
Same thing.
I'm
Yeah.
either in the car or I'm running or doing something. So I do enjoy books. I do enjoy trying, and frankly, one of the reasons I do this show, and one of the reasons I do the podcast, and I do the other, I mentor and I get involved. It's because of this. I like to hear the stories of other people. I like to hear what they did. I learned so much. I mean, I've interviewed probably, in the past 6 years of doing this show and others, I probably interviewed 1,000 entrepreneurs, and I learned something every day. And I think that's important. I try to learn something good every day, or I try and give a nugget every day too. So yeah, I agree with you. I love talking to people, and I love reading, and I love gaining knowledge. So that intellectual curiosity is, in fact, very important. But I appreciate you coming on again. I think it was really gold because you didn't give a lot of theory. It was just truth, the kind that you only learn after decades in the trenches. Um, but my big takeaway is that you really don't find leaders; you build them. And if you want a company that scales, you need a repeatable system for developing managers who can, own outcomes, lead people, protect your culture. So if you're watching this, you watched it and you're serious about promoting from within, but you want to do it without the headaches, check out Rich's book, Growing Your Own, and look into his on-site leadership programs. And if you want to help building the growth plan around your team, your systems, and your revenue engine, you already know where to find Rich. So thanks for tuning in. If this episode helped you, like it, subscribe it, share it with an owner who's one promotion away from either building a powerhouse or a pressure cooker. So, again, and we'll see you guys next week. We're always trying to bring interesting entrepreneurs in to talk about ways to help you grow. So keep scaling, and we'll see you next week.